This story is not over yet, it is happening right now and needs to be actively spread so that the case is not forgotten. And its investigation turned out to be effective and the girl's killer received proper punishment. On the night of April 5th to 6th, 2025, just recently, 27-year-old Viktoriya Tonenchuk was brought to the Hlibotska hospital with extremely severe injuries. Her liver and spleen were ruptured, her skull and jawbones were crushed, her lungs were punctured, her collarbones were broken, and there was bleeding in her brain. Such injuries are typical for victims of traffic accidents. However, Viktoriya was not involved in any accident. You see, for her, that's how the meeting with her boyfriend ended, a boyfriend who had already raised his hand against her more than once before. For several days after being hospitalized, Viktoriya remained in a coma. She was connected to a ventilator. The doctors did everything they could to save the patient's life. But unfortunately, despite their efforts, on April 10th, it became known about the death of Viktoriya. This news shocked many Ukrainians, who are now demanding just punishment for the killer. So, Viktoriya met 18-year-old Yuri on social media. At that time, they were both living in the village of Hlaiboka, located in the Chernivtsi region. And soon after communicating online, Yura and Vika moved on to meeting in person. August 2024, that was when they officially became a couple. At first glance, their relationship seemed completely ordinary. But after a while, Viktoriya's friends started to notice that Yuri was excessively jealous and controlling toward his girlfriend. The guy didn't allow Viktoriya to relax even for a moment, which was likely unfamiliar and stressful for her. He constantly called and texted her whenever she went out for walks with friends. During those conversations, Yuri would interrogate her about who she was with, where she was, how much she had already drunk, when she would be home, and constantly insisted that he would come and take the girl home right away. That's one thing, but over time it reached real absurdity. So, the guy started demanding photo reports from Viktoriya, imagine that, from all her outings with her friends. He did this to make sure he wasn't being deceived. And at this point, Yuri's behavior started to resemble not love, but an unhealthy obsession. But such behavior from the boy was just the first warning sign, so to speak, that preceded terrible tragedies. Viktoriya had her own blog. She often did live streams, and in this way earned a living. Despite the fact that Yuri himself was studying and didn't work anywhere, he didn't like this kind of work his girlfriend was doing, you see. The guy started showing jealousy and eventually forbade the girl from doing live streams. Over time, Viktoriya's friends noticed that she hadn't been filming or posting anything on her page for a long time. When they asked the girl why she had stopped doing something she seemed to enjoy, and that had brought her not only satisfaction but also money for a long time, Viktoriya told the girls that Yuri didn't like her activity, so she decided to take a break for a while. Already in the fall of 2024, the friends noticed the first signs on Viktoriya's face, let's say, the first bruises. Then she confessed to her friends that this was actually Yuri's doing, he was beating her. Vika also told her friends that she understood how abnormal this was, and she said that she was about to end her relationship with her abuser. But at that time, Viktoriya didn't do it. Already in January 2025, the girl ended up in the hospital after Yuri brutally beat her. Only after recovering a bit from what she had gone through, Vika filed a report against the guy with the police. From the materials of this case, it is known that on January 4th, Yuri came to Viktoriya's home. At some point, they started arguing fiercely, and those same feelings of jealousy flared up again. So, in the heat of the conflict, Yuri attacked the girl and struck her between 10 and 15 times on different parts of her head and body. When Vika tried to break free from the attacker's grasp, he grabbed her by the shoulders and squeezed tightly. As a result of the beating, Vika ended up in the hospital with numerous bruises, hematomas, and hemorrhages. The injuries the girl sustained were classified by experts as minor bodily injuries. Now in the photo you can see the terrible condition Vika was in after that attack. And what is meant by minor bodily injuries? Well, we've already covered this in another video. The link will be somewhere here or in the description, even though the girl suffered cruel treatment from Yuri. However, after some time, she herself withdrew her complaint, and she asked law enforcement to close the criminal case regarding her beating. Viktoriya's friends explained this decision as follows. We
see the everyday bouquets and the text messages and these phone conversations. He pleaded for her forgiveness, vowing to never repeat his actions, hurt her or cause her pain again. Yes, and Vika was a very kind-hearted person. She forgave him, she believed him again.
As we can see from these testimonies, back in January, the guy was begging for forgiveness and promised never to hurt Viktoriya again. But we also see that already in April, after meeting with Yuri, the girl's life was cut short forever. And the guy himself became the main suspect in her murder. So, on April 4th, Viktoriya's friend called her and invited her to go out together somewhere in the city the next day. At first, the girl agreed, but not long before the meeting, around 3:15 p.m., Vika wrote to her friend that she had recently been to a cosmetologist. And after the procedure, her face needed time to recover, so today she just wouldn't be able to meet her. Already the next day after this conversation, Vika's friend found out that she had been hospitalized in extremely serious condition. So, what happened on April 5th that evening when Vika didn't come to the meeting? At the moment, the police are still clarifying all the circumstances of the case, but already now it can be said for sure that after Viktoriya left the cosmetologist's office, she met with Yuri. They spent some time together in the city and then took a taxi, which they planned to use to return to Libuka.
They arrived in Libuka?
It's already evening, close to...
They missed curfew and didn't get home in time. They got out not far from his house. There's still quite a long way to walk to get to his place from there. But there is that road, there are fields, there are a few houses that are just standing there, but people don't live in them.
It is known that the couple stopped not far from the local gas station. The information about why they never made it home that evening still remains a mystery. You see, unfortunately, the area where the couple got out of the taxi is not equipped with surveillance cameras. The subsequent events remain uncertain at this time. It's also unclear how much time passed between the couple leaving the taxi and the moment when a local resident heard terrifying screams coming from a field near his house. When he ran to the place where someone was screaming, he saw Yuri and Viktoriya, who was badly beaten. Here is how the man's testimony is described by the girl's friends. He insisted that
Yuri was beating her there, but he said that he was dragging her. He was shouting to give her water because she felt bad. Bring it.
The witness himself, realizing that something bad had happened, told Yuri that he would now call the police. However, Yuri replied that he didn't see any need for that. He said that his parents would come here soon. Soon they really did arrive at the scene. The couple dragged Viktoriya, who was unconscious, to their car and took her to the local hospital. Meanwhile, Viktoriya's father, Mr. Petro, was restless. Usually, he was constantly in touch with Viktoriya, but that evening, most of the man's calls went unanswered. Only after Vika ended up in the hospital did Yuri's mother answer her phone, which her father kept calling.
When the boy's mother picked up the phone, she said, "She's in the hospital." I asked, "Is she beaten again or what?" No, everything is fine. I flew to the hospital and saw that she was lying in a coma on the bed.
Upon learning about Viktoriya's condition, her relatives and friends quickly reached a conclusion. Viktoriya ended up in a coma, not just like that, but because of Yuri. They are convinced that the boy was jealous of the girl again that evening, and in fact, because of this, he beat her badly. When he realized that Viktoriya was in critical condition, he called his parents, who were supposed to help him cover up the traces of the crime. However, this plan was ruined by a neighbor who heard the noise.
That's logical. If the neighbor hadn't noticed the noise, they probably would have taken her somewhere and buried her. I still haven't found her to this day.
The version according to which Yuri killed Viktoriya was immediately considered by law enforcement as well. But still, they did not rush to charge the guy with suspicion, and at first he was involved in this case as a witness. And over time, information also appeared on social networks that Yuri, trying to avoid justice, had fled abroad altogether. At the same time, local media, referring to the words of the village residents, wrote that Yuri's father works at customs, and it was allegedly he who helped his son leave the country. Meanwhile, the condition of Viktoriya, who was in the hospital, was assessed as extremely serious. The girl was brought to the hospital already unconscious. According to the Glasgow scale, Viktoriya was in a third-degree coma, which indicates a complete absence of consciousness as well as reflexes and reaction to pain. Understanding the full complexity, the doctors immediately reported that the patient's chances of survival were quite small. However, Viktoriya's family and friends still hoped for her recovery. But unfortunately, on April 10th around 1 p.m., it became known that Viktoriya had died in the hospital, never regaining consciousness. According to the forensic expert's conclusion, the cause of her death was a closed head injury, which resulted from the inflicted trauma. When law enforcement officers learned about Viktoriya's death, they stated that they were actively working on the case, and they denied the rumors that Yuri had fled abroad. However, they reiterated that the boy is currently only considered a witness in the case.
A relative brought the victim to the medical facility. Today it became known that the young woman has died. As for the person being discussed on social media, he is a witness. He has been questioned, and he did not flee abroad. 30 minutes ago, he appeared at the police station.
A close friend of the deceased, Kristina Drachuk, upon learning about Viktoriya's death, published a post on her social media. In it, she, let's say, implied that the police are not in a hurry to arrest Yuri because, due to a lack of evidence, it is impossible to prove his guilt.
Sadly, Viktoriya has passed away. Viktoriya has passed away. She bravely fought for the life that someone dared to take from her. She was brutally beaten and abused. For 3 days we hoped, believed, and prayed for her recovery. But the worst part is that the monster will not be punished for what he did. The police say there was not enough evidence to find him guilty, but does it really have to be this way? He will be free and she is in the cold ground? Why hasn't he been punished? Why is he smiling? There are so many questions, but not a single answer. Light clouds to you, our dear Tivchenka.
Soon after this publication, the news about the woman's death gained nationwide publicity. People demanded a fair investigation of this case and were outraged both by the circumstances of the case and by the fact that the main suspect in this crime was still at large. Residents of the village of Laiboke, where the tragedy occurred, even went out to protest. They surrounded Yuri's house and chanted, "Shame!" On April 11th, 2025 in particular, due to public pressure, the police were forced to detain Yuri. Due to the victim's death, the case had already been reclassified at that time from causing grievous bodily harm to causing injuries that resulted in death. So, according to the article, Yuri faces a punishment of up to 10 years of imprisonment. On the same day, at the request of the prosecutors of the Chernivtsi District Prosecutor's Office, the district court chose a preventive measure for 18-year-old Yuri in the form of detention until June 9th, without the possibility of bail. The suspect himself asked for house arrest and stated that he sympathizes with the relatives of the deceased and does not plan to escape anywhere. Also, during that session, Yuri told his version of what happened with Viktoriya on April 5th. It's very convenient that, according to his own words, the guy simply doesn't remember most of the key events of that day and evening.
We got together, went to my restaurant and drank alcohol there. After that, we went to the cinema and my memory.
After the cinema?
Do you remember what happened? Yes. But after the police officers asked how much alcohol they had drunk that evening, the guy suddenly started to remember some more details.
How much alcohol did you drink? 350 14 ounces of whiskey. Each of us drank a bottle of champagne, and I had 2 additional beers. Then, as I remember, everything went blank. I remember that we left, got into a taxi from the depot. In the taxi, we arrived at the hill, at the crossroads, and we got out. And after that, I remember how she fell twice. I remember she got up, then I remember how I carried her on my back to the first house. I had already dragged her to the man, asked the man to bring out a mug of water. I regained consciousness and called for my mom from the coma as everything was so scary. Mom arrived and we called the ambulance. We took her to the hospital while the ambulance was en route.
The pre-trial investigation in this case is ongoing. The police still need to conduct a number of expert examinations, as well as try to establish the motive and all the details of the crime. At the same time, they note that they have no other suspects, except for Yuri. In addition, the police appealed to people who may have witnessed the crime and called for assistance.
Please contact the police. This information will also be useful to us. All versions are being considered and checked. If anyone is a witness, let them come to the police, to the investigator, and give their testimony. All this will be taken into account during the pre-trial investigation.
Literally, on the day the script for this video was written, Viktoriya was buried. She was the only child in the family. The girl's father is struggling to cope with his daughter's murder, as expected. Thank you, dear ones. For the latest updates on the case, check my Telegram channel. Any changes will be posted there.